Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Robin Truman. I'm the business editor for PAX Tech Magazine, and today I'm joined by a panel of industry experts to speak on accessibility in the cabin. The PAX panel, Developing an Accessible Future Passenger Experience, is sponsored by Safran Passenger Innovations. So thank you to SPI for helping to make today possible. The World Health Organization estimates that 1.3 billion people globally are experiencing significant disability, which is about 1 in 6 people. So today's discussion will look at accessibility in the cabin and how the aviation industry is working to use technology and services to help make travel more accessible for everyone. So without further ado, I would like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves. Louis, let's start with you.
Sure. My name is Louis Papard. I'm a software product manager here at Safran Passenger Innovations in Brea, California.
Great. Tudi?
Hi, everybody. My name is Tudi Bedou. I'm the CTO for Thales In-Flight Experience based in Irvine, California.
Fantastic. And Duncan?
Hey guys, Duncan Jackson. I'm the president of FlightPath 3D and I'm based here in San Francisco, California.
We're happy to have you.
Thank
Corinne?
you.
Hi, Corinne Strikert, founder of Effective based in Las Vegas.
Great. Andy?
Hey, I'm Andy Mason. I'm the VP of Product and Strategy at Panasonic, and I'm also in Irvine, California, right next door to Judy.
Awesome. Ainhoa?
Ainhoa Serrano, a social impact manager in Iberia, and very focused on improving the customer experience for people with disabilities.
Fantastic. Eric?
Greetings, everyone. Eric Silverstein, VP of Operations and Technology Solutions at West Entertainment, based in Hollywood, really also down in Irvine as well.
Great. And Jamie?
Hi, my name is Jamie O'Donnell. I'm the lead aviation designer at Muirhead, based in Glasgow, Scotland.
Fantastic. We're so happy to have you here with us today. So I'd like to start with talking about collaboration and inclusivity, and I'll open the floor to everyone here. When we talk about accessibility in the cabin, what elements of the passenger experience do suppliers and airlines need to focus on?
No one wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Great, Corinne. Yes, please.
Okay, so I think when it comes to focusing, what areas of the cabin, I think it's all of it. I know we have people here from different backgrounds with varying experience, but I really think airlines and the suppliers that, all come together to work in the onboard environment should focus on the whole cabin. But realistically, we know there are priorities within the airlines and also its suppliers, but I think any step is a good step in the right direction. But I think a holistic approach to the whole cabin, because it is connected, all parts of the in-flight experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult thing trying to make cabins more accessible, simply because it's been such a difficult challenge. There tends to be a lot of friction into getting things moving. And I think the most important thing is to just start having conversations about it. And the areas that are probably needed the most will end up surfacing through those conversations.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think we need to be focused on mobility, for sure, ensuring seamless movements in communication, providing effective communication for all the passengers, comfort also, not only related with the seat, but also with the IFE, providing with different languages, providing subtitles and so on. And more important is autonomy. I think it's not only accessibility, but also we need to improve their autonomy during the full journey.
That's great.
Yeah, speaking for, I would say, IFE suppliers, I think, all my colleagues will resonate with, let's say, the holistic approach. The IFE itself being, I would say, the main point of interface for the passengers, I think it has maybe like a specific role. So when it comes to IFE, I would say it's also about, let's say, the UI, right? Also, like, what are the features that can be made available? Because it's great to have a UI that is intuitive, but then including for for example, people that would be, that would be blind or, with specific needs. But it's also about what kind of capabilities we can give them, based on their unique needs. What kind of application can be made available for them so that they can benefit from all those services that are on board. It's also about the usability, right? I'm sure that there is a lot we can do with respect to, let's say, what kind of controllers, what kind of interfaces can be made available, again, based on the different needs of each passengers. And that's one of the challenges, is that all our industry, we have to, in a way, deal with passengers from a very, very big variety of, geographies and ages and horizons and let's say cultural differences, and providing them a way to interact with the system based on their needs. It's probably like one of the biggest challenge. But in the end, I agree with the team that it needs to be holistic, right? A holistic approach to the entire experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, like we're a leather supplier for the aviation industry. So we're specifically like focusing on the material of like the seat covers from the aircraft seats. And we like I definitely believe that airlines and suppliers need to focus on like the whole like experience and environment of the air cabin. As well, air travel's stressful for anyone, but especially those with like certain disabilities. I mean, we were focusing mostly on those who are neurodivergent, with all like their like heightened sensitivities, especially like noises, cramped spaces, all the smells. I mean, it's stressful for anyone, but like, if you've got some sort of barrier that's making it inaccessible to you, like, I think we need to, start collaborating with each other and definitely, make the environment just more comfortable.
Absolutely.
I'm going to pull on what Jamie said there, which is, absolutely correct. Air travel can be a very stressful experience for everyone. And I think that's only heightened if, you're handicapped or, have a high level of sensitivity. But what it needs to be is a wonderful experience. I mean, we're taking people on an adventure, whether that's business or pleasure, you're going from one place to another place. And the cabin is a big portion of that adventure. Everyone gets excited. You get on the aeroplane, you're at the airport, you're excited. What we want is for when you're in the cabin, for you to not feel stressed, but feel relieved, feel excited. And at the same time, we have to help our customers out as well as the consumer, because they're trying to get as many people as they can in. They're not just in this as part of the adventure, they want to make money. So it's how do we make the operators happy? How do we make the consumers excited? How do we take the stress out of the system and bring back that magic of flight? Everyone remembers their first flight. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I think we are all part of that ecosystem to perpetuate that magic of flight. And we can do that with our products, with our approaches, and make it inclusive for everyone. It's very, very important.
Yeah, I love that. Duncan?
And at the end of the day, it's really about also entertaining our passengers. And that's really what I'm excited to see. As you mentioned, the advancement in all these great technologies to be able to get there.
Yeah, I mean, you say, what should airlines and suppliers focus on? I think the primary focus is a people first, inclusive approach to designing the experience. If you come at it from that angle, then you will acknowledge the age differentials, disability differentials, and that really complex, varied approach. I think classically, we've thought about it in terms of business and business class, first class economy. I think we need to think of it in terms of more of an inclusive approach. And that includes not only that age barriers, youth, as well as the elderly, as well as the, middle-aged, but also those based on disability that's both cognitive, visual, audio, mobility. And if you take that inclusive approach, that should be your foundation to start with what problems you're solving.
Yeah, that's fantastic. In terms of having that inclusive approach and an accessible approach to air travel across the board, what are the potential benefits of industry-wide collaboration? And what are some of the current barriers to having that kind of open discussion, open collaboration that kind of creates a uniform experience for passengers, no matter who they're traveling with, where they're going? Lewis, would you be able to speak to that?
Sure. I mean, we've been working internally here at SPI to try and make more accessible in-flight entertainment products. And one of the things that we tried to do was we started working on solutions, and then we realized that we had to really stop and really think about things and start just working with different nonprofits and different enablement communities all around the world. And we found that as soon as we started having these conversations and really started having really open talks with passengers that travel with disabilities, we started to learn a ton about what disabled passengers go through in their travel journey, in that experience, in the airport, in lounges, in the terminals, in the aircraft, and all parts of flying, right? And one of the things that we learned is that passengers with disabilities prepare for their travel experience more than any other demographic. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there's a lot of opportunities that I think that we in the industry could learn from the concept of preparing to travel, in that people with disabilities will want to have expectations, right? Because they're looking to try and overcome their disabilities as best as they can to participate in the travel experience. And so creating like consistencies and creating an expectation that can be somewhat realized. I know it's really difficult, even all of us in the industry try and, fly on like a new aircraft, and they get to the airport and they're like, this is not the aircraft config that I thought that I was going to fly on, just because it's really hard to catch those configs, right? And you think about this from the perspective of any Joe average traveler, right? It's difficult to be able to know exactly what to expect, exactly what aircraft, what technology, what features and all that are going to be on your aircraft. How do we try and make a more holistic experience, something that's anticipatable by passengers? I think that's the real trick.
Yeah, absolutely. Corinne, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think when it comes to benefits, I just wanted to take a step back. We were talking about focus before. Something that I wanted to add, I think it's really important, whether you're an airline or a supplier, to also have people with disabilities on your team, in your workforce, because how can you build products for your customers if your workforce does not reflect the people that you're building for? And overall, that kind of wraps up into the benefits of the collaboration, whether it's internally with your employees from a very diverse workforce, as well as, community groups, support groups, and also with your partners and suppliers. I think that brings obviously benefits to consistency, a better product that is made by people for people who will use it as well. And, it goes without saying, I think there are cost savings and efficiencies of collaboration at an industry level. Probably to give you one use case to put things into perspective, just picking any airline, let's just say Fiji Airways, for example, they've got both of, I believe, Panasonic and a Thales fleet. Now, if you're flying from Los Angeles to Sydney, what I fly often and many people do, and you were to fly them, you could potentially experience both suppliers on that flight if you stop via Nandi in Fiji on the way. Now, what does that really mean, and how can industry collaboration really bring benefit to that? So if you're a person that was visually impaired, you're flying one carrier that had one provider on there, you'd be having probably potentially different ways of doing things, different hand gestures if you're visually impaired trying to use the IFE, and then you connect on the other aircraft which has a different supplier, which could be a different way of doing things. So this is a real life use case. So I think collaboration at probably initially at the product development level, when it comes to gestures and things that are in common within the cabin, everybody gets on the plane and flies, so I think that could be a really good starting point. And obviously the benefits of sharing that information, coming together and collaborating, we all reap the benefits of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you brought up a really good point there, Corinne, about consistency. So if we can collaborate as an industry, we can create this shared knowledge pool, which would avoid duplication. We can channel resources into innovation. We can build that consistency, because cognitive overload is something that's a little addressed right now with the complexities of the systems that we're building. So getting simplified, clear labels, simplified interfaces, and if you are taking multiple legs on different systems, you need that. You know, as a visually impaired individual, you'd want high contrast displays, large text icons, and that consistent navigation across systems. And if we can put the shared knowledge in place, we can avoid duplication and create that consistency, as well as regulatory compliance as well, which is a big driver right now, which I'm pleased to see. It is that path towards commonality.
Yeah, Duncan, you brought up interfaces, which is one of the areas that we've been focusing a lot on at SPI. And we found that, oftentimes when it comes to IFAC, the conversation usually centers around like software features and how do we get that improved up to the level of, smartphones and tablets that a lot of passengers expect. But working with a lot of these interest groups, we've had a lot of interest in having like common sort of user interfaces and common ways that passengers can see and expect the same thing, not only from flight to flight within the same operator, but those times when you're moving from operator to operator throughout your travel journey. And one of the things that we challenged ourselves to do was to not only build a user interface that could be as easily accessible as possible, but we said that we were just going to go and give those designs away for free to the industry so that any airline, any IFAC vendor could utilize those designs on their systems with their suites of software features in an effort to help make that experience more common for travelers going from airline to airline, system to system, and technology to technology.
That's amazing, especially as the barrier to this stuff is probably competitive concerns around sharing like proprietary innovation. So good for you guys.
Yeah,
it is remarkably difficult to give something away for free. I'll tell you that.
And that's kind of like where we are right now. I think a lot of IFE suppliers have now developed very interesting and very promising solution. For example, when it comes to user interfaces, but it's true that as there is no yet any standardization, we came up, all of us, I think, with different implementations, right? A number of gestures that are supported, reference. How do you, let's say, select an item? How do you go to the next part of the menu, et cetera, et cetera? And it also has implication on the application themselves, right? If we're going to, for example, provide a map experience for blind passengers, which in itself is a very big challenge. Well, how do you navigate into that application? So it has implication on the UI, but it also has implication on the application themselves. And so this interoperability, right, as I think we should call it, is I think the biggest challenge. And I think we are ready as a industry to go now to that level, right? I think we all have developed very promising solutions. Now it's really time to put them on the table. And just as you said, Duncan, like share them, take the ones that are the best, and also make sure that they are, let's say, really like validated from, again, the users. Because that's also something that we have found at Thales when we develop our visually impaired UI, is who are you really developing that solution for? Like in the example of blind passengers, are they blind passengers or are they visually impaired? Do they have color challenges? What kind of challenges, and who are you developing, right? So in our case, we took almost like the extreme example, the extreme use case, which was, let's try to develop a visually impaired UI for really blind passengers. So in itself, it was a huge challenge. We learned a lot of it. We went through a very long validation process, because at the end, that's what we want to make sure, is that we develop solutions that are really going to answer, and that are going to provide what is expected. And that validation process also should be part of what we should undertake, right? Make sure that we have the solutions, but that they are developed in a consistent manner, and that they are validated also in a consistent manner. Again, for all the geographies, all the different types of users that are out there.
Fantastic. Andy, would you be able to speak to how the passenger experience can be improved through more standardized accessibility features?
Yeah, one of the things that we've done Well, let me step back a bit. One of the things that we're all guilty of in aerospace is we can get a bit insular. You know, aerospace is a pretty big market, but in the grand scheme of tech, we're a drop in the ocean. We all get high on our own supply because we travel more than anyone else because we're always flying around trying to see, you know, these same 400 customers are all like competing over. So we all get a little bit insular and inward focused. You know, one of the things that Panasonic's done, and I'm sure the others have done as well, is try and take a step back and look at what the wider tech industry is doing. Just an interesting statistic, Apple sells more iPads a week than there are IFE monitors in the market total. I mean, it sells millions of these things. I think it's like 70 million they sold last year. It's an enormous amount. You know, the other Android tablets are out there and available as well. And these already have quite good standardized accessibility features that handicapped or handicapable people are used to. And what we wanted to do is take a step back and say, if we're not traveling every single week like most of us are, and we only travel maybe once a year or once every 2 years, you want to have something that's maybe a bit more familiar from a market perspective to a device that you already have. And it's how do we bring that outside influence in and take a step away from aerospace for a moment and say, maybe we're not the big, most important thing in the world. Maybe the wider industry is slightly more important because, you know, back to, you know, Jamie's point originally, which is, air travel can be stressful. We can take stress out by taking that wider perspective in. So, you know, I think one of the things that we've tried to do, and I think we've all tried to do, is maybe work a little bit more with educational establishments that really focus on this particularly. It almost goes to what Corinne said, you know, make sure we're inclusive of people who are actually suffering the problem and not imagining that we have a problem. And I think that's extremely important because otherwise we'll just develop a solution that we think is good for us rather than is actually good for the market that we're serving.
That's a great point. Lewis, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I was just about to jump in. I completely agree with Andy. I think that trying to make these IFAC systems as similarly usable as a lot of the technology that people are already using in their pockets or in their backpacks is super critical. Inventing new technologies that are completely different from the standards that already exist is probably not the best option there, right? Utilizing the gestures that are already standard, the hand movements that are already standard, the positioning of things on screens that are already known and understood by passengers of all demographics, not just those with disabilities, is not just a great way to improve the accessibility experience. It's the best way to improve the IFEC experience is by latching onto those industry standards or standards that are already just prevalent in the market.
Yeah, exactly. Jamie, you had mentioned the goal of taking the stress out of the travel experience. Can you speak to how incorporating sensory products can work to elevate the passenger experience, particularly for neurodivergent adults?
Of course, yes. So we created a leather collection / concept called Sensation, which was focusing on the experiences of neurodivergent adults and how their sensitivities can improve comfort in air travel. So it's using things like what colors are best, like textures, signposting, like what can we do from, you know, what Muirhead already do, like with our design capabilities, how can we give that purpose to create an air travel experience that is better for everyone. So with this concept, like I wanted to make sure that it wasn't othering to those who are neurodivergent, like being being in kind of in that space. I kind of wanted to make sure I got lots of different like voices coming in. So we actually consulted with a disability consultant called VIA, which is in Scotland, and we wanted to like speak to people, like actually speak to people and have people like on our team who are neurodivergent, have like autism or ADHD, but also like sensory sensitivities as well. And yeah, just like speak to them. So with these like seat covers, we wanted to make them both functional and aesthetically pleasing. We found that many of the designs that we're seeing and many of the solutions for accessibility are often very medicalized, especially if they're made for like neurodivergent people. They're either very medicalized or they're made for children. And we just found that there was nothing out there for neurodivergent adults and like everyone in between. So we just wanted to give adults with disabilities the premium experience that they deserve, just like everyone else, and without like making them feel different from everyone. And it's, leather's lovely, isn't it? It gives you that sort of nice luxury experience that we all kind of want when we're flying. So
That's fantastic. Let's talk about accessibility and IFE systems and content. So IFE is constantly evolving, and what can be done to support passengers with visual, hearing, mobility, and cognitive disabilities in the perspective of IFE and content?
So I can jump in here because I think it was 2D that mentioned that the map is quite a challenge to work with. So the map's one of the most rich and interactive applications in flight. If you imagine it, like we can all visualize it, the topology of the Earth with its rich colors, lots of place names, you've got pinch and zoom controls, the aircraft's moving, there's advanced features, there's lots of flight data, and it's become a very rich application. If you then sort of layer in cognitive challenges, where you need a simplified interface, we need clear labels, we need consistent navigation, we need to declutter and simplify the map. You need to strip out a lot of those challenges and capabilities so that you can create a clear, easy to use interface. For visual accessibility, high contrast displays, large icons, we actually took the map, applied what is known as the WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We applied 2.1 and 2.2 features to the map and said, okay, how do we strip these things out, reduce place names and all the bulk in the map, slow things down and so on. We then went and implemented it. I was actually at an airline, one of the US major airlines last week, one of the big ones, at their headquarters with their accessibility board. So I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday last week, we're actually doing testing with that group. And just like Louis talked about working with accessibility groups, and 2D talked about validating, and Andy talked about making sure it's all inclusive, we took this group into what was an experience that I'll paint the picture as to what we did with the product. And the reality of what happened was we walked into their labs. You guys have all seen the banks of screens. We were asked to turn the lights off because it was too much glare. Now you're in a dark environment, surrounded by people with cognitive issues. There were people with guides. There were blind dogs at your feet. We're working through these screens. And the first thing you had to do is figure out how do you get into the map and turn it into the accessibility mode, which is a responsibility of the IFE. And you're looking at this bank, and I was with 2 individuals, and we'd made this high contrast display. We'd made it light gray for the Earth, the actual land topology, and we'd made it dark for the ocean. We followed the guidelines, which made it ADA accessible. First thing I'm being told is there's too much glare when an aircraft's flying over North America, so we need to reverse those colors. So the idea that you can actually reverse the contrast is really important. Just seeing people with motor issues trying to hit what was a large hit target told you everything. Large hit targets are required as part of the content rules. You put a large set of buttons in there. Having someone who was visually impaired but able to pinch and zoom and see that individual interact with the map versus somebody that with the motor skills actually couldn't zoom the map because they couldn't hit the pinch and zoom. Took all of those accessibility guidelines for mobility, audio, visual, and cognitive, paled in paled in significance until you sit in front of an actual group and work through it. And we actually came up with, to Tootie's point, an even lower baseline that allowed it to be more inclusive. And now we've realized that what we have to do is figure out how we can use more intelligence to start layering those functionalities back in, so that people that turn into power users are really engaging with the map, because the tools we put in enabled them to be inclusive. We're now able to like participate in more advanced functions, but just following the guidelines is definitely half the journey, but getting in front of people is mind-blowing. And I'll just leave you with this comment, which I actually posted on LinkedIn on my journey back, which is just from that one experience, which is one of many. I actually was racked with guilt for not doing this years ago.
Yeah, we had a lot of similar experiences when we were testing our GUI out with different enablement organizations as well. It's insane how much you can learn just by wanting to get basic feedback on whether it's a feature or part of a design, how much feedback you can get just by standing back and allowing different people to use the systems and products and features that you're designing. It's wild that you can take a button, and if you can make a button a little bit bigger, you can make the text bigger. And if you change the contrast on it a little bit, you can make it much easier to see. But then you realize that a lot of the features that even the industry started to navigate to help compensate for different types of disabilities is not always going to be needed if you can get the design right in the first place. So a lot of different features that smartphones and tablets have that work to help make these different generically offerable experiences more accessible, when if you were to really look at accessibility from the beginning, you might not find or have a need to use these different compensation features if you can get the design right to begin with. So having those really big buttons makes them much easier to touch and reach. You can get the text bigger, you can get the contrast right. Compensating for color blindness isn't something that's needed as much, right? If you get the contrast right, then it's easier for everybody to see, and it's easier for everybody to touch and reach, and it's just overall more usable. How you get in and out of these features is just as important as how you use them too. So it's amazing what you can learn by really working together.
I will share with you, Louis, a funny story, all you guys, which is when we were being asked to change the colors to like a different contrast setting, one of the board members brought up their phone to show me what it looked like on their email. And when they brought up their email and it was a dark background, it was showing how the settings were set up on their phone. I was shocked to see that my size setting on my phone, which is set to max, was actually larger than what his was. And he indicated that I had worse eyesight than he did. Because my setting was more extreme for my eyes than his was, which was everybody was laughing at that. So yeah.
Yeah, we've had this pursuit to get as many features and functions on all these different systems, and sometimes you need to take a step back and say, well, I think there might be some more important things sometimes than to have the kitchen sink and everything else included with every different system. So
I just wanted to add, I think, it's some really great comments coming out here, and I kind of wanted to piece it together. So Duncan used the word pinch and zoom as a way of navigating within his map. Lewis said how we get in and out of applications. Now, if you look at it from FlatPath 3D is an application that sits on the IFE within the GUI, the graphical user interface, which Safran, Panasonic, and Thales create, right, for their customers. Now, when it comes to the industry evolving, I believe now is the time for this collaboration, because you may pinch and zoom in a FlightPath 3D map, but you may do a different gesture in a Panasonic GUI, and in Thales you'll do it differently, and in Safran you'll do it differently. I've had the privilege of being exposed recently to all these solutions and can tell you there are similarities and there are differences, particularly for the blind passenger. For example, activating the text-to-speech feature. I know one provider, and I won't call you out, I'd say one provider has some gestures which the other one does not, given they were built at different timeframes. But I think as the industry is evolving, we know we need to build accessible solutions. We know there's some really great, everybody's offering great products And I think it's great that everybody, all the suppliers are focusing on that. But I believe now is the time to bring all that together. Otherwise, you'll be pinching and zooming in one application, you'll be triple tapping in the other, you'll be swiping up and down. And when you think of the passenger experience, again, say you're flying to the Middle East, which I believe there is a carrier that has all three providers, Safran, Panasonic, and Thales. Now, if you're flying them internationally, you could potentially be on all three aircraft. So you're pinching and zooming on one, triple tapping on the other, doing all these different gestures. So I believe now really is the time to bring this collaboration as the industry is evolving, the technology is coming.
That's a great point. Tootie, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Corinne, right? I mean, that's what we have said for visually impaired, and again, you know, for how to interact with the IFE. I think we are mature now. We are at a point where it is time, you know, for us to come up with the standards. And to Andy's point, I think most of us, you know, probably utilized, you know, Apple and Android, let's say reference designs, right? Reference gestures to be able to implement our UIs. But of course, we may have selected different subset or the totality of those gestures. So, you know, how do you provide, you know, that consistent experience? For hearing impaired passengers, we have also tried to push the boundaries because I think to answer to your question, what can be done to help? Well, I think there is definitely a very large room for innovation, right? Because there are some solutions that exist out there, but there are also things that need to be customized for the for our own experience, for our own vertical. So, for example, for hearing, okay, you know, the industry has adopted, you know, closed caption, I think, 15, 20 years ago, and that's great, but that only provides, let's say, a solution for some disabilities. Now, what about, for example, you know, passengers that can really resonate with like sign language, right? So that's something that we have prototyped, okay, to be able to go beyond just like, you know, again, the traditional closed caption, right? And this is really like a domain where we are investing, I would say, quite a lot of our T&I time to be able to propose ideas, of course, discussed with, you know, focus groups, you know, disability groups, for them to give us feedback. You know, okay, yeah, that capability is interesting, because their reference point right now is I would say more a frustrating experience, which is that, you know, all IFE suppliers provide a different solution when they provide one, because in many cases, you know, some of the systems are pretty old. So, for example, they may not have those capabilities available, right? I think there is also like a lot of room for improvement for like, I would say, like physical impairment, right? You look at all the controllers for IFE. I believe that none of them have, you know, any like a texture to be able to know, you know, where is the up and down and left and right and, you know, turn off and etc. Right? We all came up with different controllers. Again, nothing is really standardized, and here I think there is definitely a lot of innovation that can be brought into that domain.
Absolutely. Andy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'd say two things. On the UI side, I think that I'm going to say it a little bit differently. I think we all provide interfaces to the customers, but we aren't exclusive there. Many of the customers actually go to third-party interface providers because they see that as their window to the customer. So, for example, we have a couple of products that we sell into the market for some airlines, and they'll pick those interfaces. And those are the ones that are really quite good in terms of, you know, the gesture control that we built in, as Corinne talked about. However, some of the major airlines or the really big airlines who are trying to do a little bit more around customization and creating an engagement space rather than just an entertainment screen, they're actually either self-developing or they're developing with external providers as well. So we end up it being in a consultative position there in terms of this is what we're seeing in the industry where some of those standards don't exist, and there's some complexity to that. On the other side of, you know, what's happening in the industry at the moment, we're actually at an exciting time. Everyone's obviously heard the AI buzzword more than, you know, they probably would like to. And it is actually providing some really good opportunities for how content applications and systems can work and be developed for the consumer.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a whole bunch and a whole plethora of activity happening in that wider market around things like text to speech, around speech controls that go along with content and media that can come in, and they're extremely powerful. And all we need to be able to do is kind of capture some of that and have it built into our systems. And I think that's what we're probably all doing at the moment, is how do we pull that space in? It's very powerful. We don't necessarily have to develop everything. You know, the wider market's developing this stuff. Most of our systems work on a back end of systems that are used externally to aerospace. So that's some of the exciting things that I think are just generally going to improve the situation for everyone. What I really like seeing at the moment is the airlines are starting to take this seriously. We are starting to see this focus on wanting to be inclusive for all passengers and understanding that it is important. You know, we're seeing airlines starting to take seats out for you know, handicapped, handicapable passengers. And we are starting to see more of a focus on inclusiveness in things like the in-flight entertainment system as well. It used to be an afterthought. Now it's a clear part of those requirements that they want to have built in, whether that's coming to us as IFE providers or to the UI providers that are external and bought in. Sometimes those UI providers do it to lots of people, but every now and again there's a new, you know, a new technology company that shows up in the Valley or in London or something that has a great way of doing something, and airlines just wants to go and leverage, and they just don't have that understanding, and it's up to us to kind of consult and build that in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just want to add on that, you know, that there are a lot of probably UI, as Andy said, out in the marketplace that build these for airlines, but ultimately it sits on the supplier's platform, whether it be Safran, Panasonic or Thales or any other new and up and coming provider. So it would need to be built to that spec, and it's based on the underlying operating system. So there is some limitation there as to what can be done. I don't think it's a free for all, go out and build it, because it has to function on the hardware. I also wanted to add, in terms of IFE constantly evolving, and you know, going back to the original question of supporting the passenger, and I think this is critical. I think from an airline perspective is to take a step back. Yes, you've got, for example, in-flight entertainment, but within cabin, the communication piece, not just about how to use the IFE, from the point of booking, the whole customer, every customer touch point along the way, communication is key. You know, to be able to, you know, it's one thing to build these systems, but we need to be able to communicate where they are, how to use them, what you'll need them for, to the passenger, because if you don't communicate, they don't know. And I have flown some airlines that have had features that didn't communicate it. And I think that's also something that is really, really critical to support the passenger as we build these products and services. If we're not communicating it, it's futile. So there needs to be a strong communication outside of the product, probably being driven by a marketing communications team across all products within the in-flight and also on-ground experience.
Yeah, we've had a couple instances internally where we've worked with airlines, and that it's a totally true statement, like what you guys mentioned, what Andy mentions, where sometimes an airline just finds a new technology or feature or has something that they're just really, really interested in implementing. And I was working with one recently, and they were really wanting to have some certain colors in the accessible interface, and we were saying, hey, you know, we don't recommend these different types of colors, like reds can be triggering to certain types of neurodivergence, and different weighting of colors being in conflict, like with WCAG guidelines from a color contrast perspective. And I had an airline trying to fight me on saying, but this is our brand's color. And I'm sitting here saying, well, the blind community doesn't really care so much about your brand's color. And they were trying to argue with me about the importance of it. And it wasn't really registering that there's a lot of things that are probably more important than maybe some of the different agendas that like a marketing department might have or an advertising department might have. And when it really sets in, okay, yes, perhaps the needs of certain types of communities might be more than the needs of your marketing department.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
'cause I absolutely agree with that, actually, on that point about like the use of color is actually really important for especially those who are neurodivergent. Like a lot of my research that I've done into like colors and things like that is that like especially autistic people tend to favor the color green, which makes sense because it's very calming, and it's kind of associated with nature, I suppose. It's very grounding. Whereas, as you said, with like red, it can be often triggering because it's a very aggressive color. I think it's that whole point of like designing for people who are actually going to be on board these planes rather than for like a brand or for profit, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a content service provider perspective, what are the key ways that passengers with visual, audio, and cognitive disabilities can enjoy IFE content throughout the journey? And what are kind of the responsibilities on the part of the airline to ensure that that happens? Eric, and then Ainoa, would you be able to speak to that?
Yes, totally. I mean, obviously on our side, it's really one of the items that Corinne pointed out, the communication, to just not only just, being able to show what do I actually have on board, how to potentially also then communicate with them in advance of what it is that you'll be able to enjoy on board. On our side, we have our client in Asia is putting on their homepage for their entertainment page, the facility of audio captioning and description. And so that's really, I think, the area on the content side that we can actually really just be more upfront and be accessible for that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, as mentioned before previously several times, I think if I would say that a key is, again, listen and understanding the main points for them. And also is key to test with them also the solutions, not only the issues, but also when you propose a solution, you need to involve all of them for them to provide you the feedback. No? So this is for me the key, but what kind of things we can do? For instance, well, at the description, as Eric mentioned, closed caption and subtitles, but not only, as said by Corinne, I think, I hope so, not only for entertainment, but also for communication, clear communication. Everyone needs to know if they need to do anything during the flight or if there is an emergency. So we need to talk not only in entertainment, but also in important information for providing, and also during the whole customer experience. And also we have text and audio option. So there are several things to do, key to do, and how we can move to the next steps. I think content service provider and airlines needs to be in the same page, investing in technology, not only the one that we are mentioning right now, but also the artificial intelligence for focus on the special needs. And again, specific feedback mechanisms to receive this information from them. This is the only way to understand if we are, at the end, we need to achieve this need. So we need to understand if we are doing in the right thing, in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And Eric, what are some of the challenges for content service providers in delivering accessible content?
So one of the key, and it's still surprising, is that, obviously English has been very easily available across all Hollywood and major distributors, but then it comes down to really the foreign languages. So obviously have two hats here. We're actually then here to supply content, but we also have a lab representing some of the biggest distributors. And even from Hollywood, even Hollywood does not automatically again cater to have automatically audio description for all languages. And we're talking about major studios. So they're just, they're definitely, it's on their radar. They're, I will not name names, like Corinne said, as far as just, all studios at this point, it's obviously they recognize the market, but to my surprise, they're still up to today as they're releasing and selling to the world. It's not just an automatic language that they can actually bring in. From an independent distributor, the challenge obviously is also a cost element, because obviously to actually acquire that language costs them money. So for us, it's probably going back to that communication with the airline that says, okay, this is a very big commitment. It's an important market for us. these are the costs that we have to build within the budget to be able to bring these languages. But then, as Andy mentioned, with technology now, you have actually access to do a lot of, really cool things on board. But obviously for us, we're representing both from an airline, working with all our OEM partners, but also the studios who actually need to have that kind of approval process instead of just allowing the technology to be turned on. But recognizing back to what Duncan noted on, really just being able to understand that audience, have a lot of feedback, what's working, what's not working, what can we do actually better, and bringing that information back to, again, the content community, so that it's just not only just repurposing what we can actually easily get access to, what can we actually do better as well.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. And Andy mentioned AI, and of course, that's become a very big point of conversation, especially in the last year, across all industries, but especially in the cabin. So, how does AI create new opportunities for passengers with disabilities, and especially in the area of the in-flight entertainment experience? How can AI improve that passenger experience?
So
there's too much work going into it. I mean, the great thing is that the investment going into AI at the moment globally is huge. It's being leveraged across, all boundaries. The amount of work that we're seeing going in outside of the aerospace industry and inside of the aerospace industry is huge. It's probably one of the highest areas of investment that there is. It's clearly a game changer for all of us from the consumer experience and the passenger experience. I can see it taking a huge portion of, descriptive content, of text to speech, of translation, all of these elements coming forwards, as well as picking up on specific trends. We talked a little bit earlier about maybe some sort of standardization. AI can really help bring that along because it can push forward those standard features and take care of it inside the aeroplane. So you could almost take some of those standardization elements away where we have to put a lot of element in up front to building these things. This can now be done by an AI engine on the aeroplane. So I think the future is very good. We have to obviously keep a close eye on the technology to make sure we bound it in the right way. But I think it's going to be a huge game changer, probably more of a game changer than any of us quite realize at this point. I think it's going to go back to, the point I was trying to make at the start, which is taking the stress out of the system and empowering the magic of flight, because we can take a lot of those elements that are very complicated for the UI providers to do, and it can be done in the machine. And I just love the idea that this can happen and we don't necessarily have to rely on ourselves doing it. The market can come and provide it. We just kind of have to be able to adopt it.
Yeah, I very much agree with what you're saying there, Andy. We have tried to, I think as a group, we've done a really good job today articulating what some of the challenges are, and we've painted the target as to what we're trying to accomplish. I think AI is tremendously exciting, and I think it affords us really impressive opportunities right now. We, for example, just to give a practical picture here, is we wanted to narrate the flight journey and create an in-flight companion that's like your digital concierge in your pocket. So we created this flight companion called Lucy, and it takes different channels and feeds of information. And to Andy's point, it drastically simplifies it. So imagine a sort of like chat-like experience in flight where it's telling you that you're flying at 39,000 feet and you land in 2 hours, 47 minutes. It tells you what is around the aircraft. So it's painting this picture that says you're 35 miles east of the Grand Canyon right now. And when you land, these are the things that you can experience in flight. And we put that on 700 aircraft. We delivered 20 million messages last month to millions of passengers. And it's really helping with some of that reduced cognitive load because it's just feeding at the pace at which you can digest information. It's helping with those kind of like motor mobility skills because I don't have to navigate to a flight information page or jump into a destination guide. And it became really self-evident when I was chatting to one of the individuals that when they were trying to last week read the map, they leant in so close that they were a couple of inches from the screen moving left to right with one of their eyes as the target. They were trying to read elements that when we plug this into text to speech, that can then narrate the journey. And when we, talk through with the disability board, that you can sit back in your seat and it's going to say, hi, we land in 2 hours, 47 minutes. The time at the destination is this, and it has that conversation. It has just tremendous lift. And I think that not only can that be applied in that use case, but it can be on top of all the applications. So in our video destination guide, where you're swiping through content, we had it read all of the descriptions. And this isn't just for the inclusive group, it's also for myself, because nobody wants to read anymore. No one wants to read 3 paragraphs about a destination. So we abstracted the most salient information, layered it on top of the video. So I'm sitting there and it's telling me in bullet points and chat bubbles what's going on in this destination. So I don't have to deal with the cognitive load in flight of reading 2 paragraphs of text about a location, and it can feed me that. So I think we're just touching on what the opportunities are here. I see us putting this on 2,000 aircraft by this time next year at the rate of which we're adopting this, because it really is, to Andy's point, that opportunity to solve a lot of problems, simplify the process, and address a lot of the things and concerns we've done today. And I think we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, there's so many bridges that AI can help facilitate for things that would have otherwise manually been incredibly difficult or impossible. Like the idea of bridging the image to audible barrier is easier with AI, but there's a lot of things even going in the reverse direction. How do you somehow make something that would be only audibly available, like a PA announcement or something like that, having that able to be understood and translated and provided visually to a passenger, sort of opposite direction, it is really incredible. Figuring out how you can not only bridge barriers, but also work backwards is really, really cool. It's something that would be super difficult to do by hand, but AI can make these things a lot more accessible.
Yeah, that multimodal nature of what you're saying there. I had Ray-Ban glasses on connected to the internet. They're smart. I'm looking out of a window and it's telling me you're looking out of a window at a mountain range. Now, it didn't have the GPS coordinates right now, and it can't tell me the specific range, but that multimodal nature of what you're talking about, Louis, it's absolutely there for that sort of interpretation to shine a light on this community.
Yep, for sure.
Judy, would you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Corinne.
Sorry, I just wanted to add on the point of AI. I think it really brings speed, the ability to build things a lot quicker. However, from my experiences in what I've been working on, the error rate is shocking. I've seen some output and it's just been really inaccurate. So I think really the message here is just to caution relying on it 100%. I think to understand its limitations, and it is learning from humans, and we're not perfect, doesn't come from some divine being, but just to be mindful of implementing that, especially when it comes to safety, which I think is the most critical factor in aviation on board the aircraft. So not to rely entirely on that, because I don't think AI is there yet to be able to have that 100% confidence in it.
It also uses a lot of computing power as well. So you've got to be really, and internet connectivity. So we started with a private database of points of interest, traction, flight data, and then we built the application to run standalone in flight. So it has that intelligence. And then the updates are done using the internet as opposed to pulling stuff. And you can avoid all those hallucinations, because the minute you get stuff wrong, to your point, that impacts the passenger experience and the airline's brand. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, whether it's when you're working with AI or not working with AI, we found that one of the most important things was making sure that you're designing things and testing them with the community, not just trying to make something for any given community. It's been super critical to make sure that you are addressing the needs that need to be addressed.
Is anyone comfortable speaking to the role of the cabin crew and helping passengers understand these technology services available in the cabin as they're being implemented, and their new the role of the crew and helping passengers activate and use these software innovations versus just the intuitiveness of the software?
I could offer some historical examples, having done this about 5 years ago when I was at United. The crew were critical to the success of developing, implementing, training, and supporting the system. Historically, when I was involved in this project, we had the crew from day one. involved in understanding the system, training them, getting their feedback, because they need to be able to communicate that and support passengers. The research at the time, and this is to show how things evolved, the research at the time that we had conducted showed that passengers wanted the ability to be able to do it themselves. They didn't want it activated by the crew, so the design was driven by that requirement based on the research we had done at the time. Now, times have changed, technology's changed, and that may have changed with recent studies, but crew play a critical role because they're the first line. You know, if there's an issue with the system, if it's not working, they're there to support the passenger or to guide them, or if the passenger didn't get the communications, assuming the airline's emailing them out day of departure, that kind of stuff, they're there to educate, support, and ensure that the passenger has a great experience, but also their safety, and depending on to what extent that is built into the in-flight entertainment system as well. So very, very critical to engage them from day one and get their input as well on a solution.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I have to completely agree with Corinne. When we were doing a lot of research with airlines and with different enablement communities, there was a massive desire for independence from passengers. I mean, in this day and age, you know, passengers, disabilities or otherwise, passengers have a desire to be independent. They want to be as less of a burden on whether it's the crew or the person sitting next to them, right? People want to be independent. But even in that pursuit of independence, ultimately the cabin crew, for all different airlines, the cabin crew are there and they're essential in trying to provide that best experience to everyone in the cabin. And at the end of the day, we need to make sure that these systems are not only able to enable passengers to be independent, but are also fully capable of allowing the crew to assist as well, whether it's directly to the passengers or digitally through the IFAC systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was Corinne who mentioned all of the touch points being important in the passenger experience in terms of from booking, IFE, everything on board. And we know that AI is helping a lot of airlines to kind of work with passenger loyalty, learning more about the passenger. So in terms of anticipating passenger needs using AI, how can airlines make the passenger experience better for travelers with disabilities using these tools? Ainoa?
Well, from airline perspective, using AI and machine learning in AFE system could really help and analyze data from previous flights, for instance, to adapt experience to individual needs. Imagine, for instance, if a passenger constantly requires larger text or specific audio settings or context or whatever, the system could automatically adjust this preference before boarding. So imagine the huge experience for them. And also AI can use to predict and address potential issues before they arise by analyzing patterns or historical data. Imagine, again, as an example, if a passenger frequently is asking assistance with boarding for a specific part of the process, the system can or could alert ground staff to provide additional support in advance. So this information can change the customer experience at all.
Yeah, fantastic. Trudy, would you be able to speak to that as well?
Yeah, I think we definitely, in summary, there are a lot of opportunities, for applying AI and machine learning to a lot of, let's say, touch points. Let's say synthesis of massive amounts of data. Okay, to help all of us in the industry, the airlines, the OEM, the IFE supplier, everybody involved, right? To understand, let's say, what's going on in the cabin. Because by the way, there is nothing more challenging than even like understanding how passengers are using or not using, or having challenges to using the IFE, right? So AI and machine learning can definitely help us to find I would say some of those let's say difficult touch points and how to address them. We spoke also about like virtual assistants. I think there's definitely a lot that can be done here. I would say to either as Louis said, provide a support to the passenger with some level of, let's say, independence, so that the passenger with a special need can be let's say directly helped by the assistant without requiring a crew to come over. But of course, there's probably always going to be a limit to that, and then that poses, let's say, another challenge, which is, for example, how can AI and how can we let's say facilitate the conversation between the crew and, for example, like a blind passenger. Right? That by itself is a huge challenge. And I think, again, here there are, I would say, let's say, commercial applications, or there are already solutions that exist out there, at least to a certain extent, to be able to help that, right? And so the IFE can, I'm sure, be an extension of those kind of solutions. But there's definitely a lot that can be done. I think we also need to be cautious, because I think, as we said, there's a lot going on in AI. There's definitely a lot of investment, but there's a lot of things that are not really usable or user-friendly or too complex. So we need to, do what's right? And again, this is where I would say, very strong collaboration between, I would say, again, the airlines, the suppliers, and then again the end users, with a very strong, let's say, again, restating what I said before, but the validation process for me is very, very paramount, right? We don't want to just bring in AI as like a gimmick. It needs to really be there to solve problems, right?
Absolutely. Andy, would you like to add anything?
I mean, I'll just reiterate on the point I made earlier. It's a extremely strong tool. It's going to get used more in the future, a lot more in the future. It's having literally billions and billions of dollars of investment put into it every single day at the moment, which is great. It's about tempering it. It's about understanding that the wider industry is going to drive us rather than the other way around, so we have to be able to adopt. I agree with what Trudy said about the virtual assistants. We showed something at AIX this year in exactly that vein, a virtual avatar to help, help I'm going to say, like, help a diverse cabin. It wasn't specifically focused on accessibility, although that was a function. It was accessibility, it was translation, it was being able to communicate to crew and have crew communicate back, because more and more people are traveling and it is becoming more complex. The other sort of slight challenge we all face is, we want to bring these technologies in, and we want to bring them in quickly. The market's demanding them quickly. But in aerospace, things sometimes slow down because they operate at the speed of an OEM that just isn't used to operating at the speed of technology that we're all starting to operate at as well. So, the need for stronger compute, greater compute power, bringing that onto the cabin until the connectivity is at a rate where it is as reliable as we all want it to be, means that we need the OEMs to step up as well and enable us to bring more technology quicker to the airplane, so the public can take advantage of the technologies. I think it's extremely important. I'm excited of what's going to happen. I think we're at a great time where we get to see how AI is going to change all our lives, especially in this area. The nearest analogy will probably be the internet coming in, or cell phones coming in. It's going to completely change the way we all act and think. And if anyone isn't, completely engaged in this one, they're probably going to get left behind.
Yeah, that's a great point. So unfortunately, we don't have a seating rep with us today, so I'm going to defer to our airline representative, Ainoa, for this question. How does seat optimization make the travel experience more accessible for passengers with mobility challenges or physical disabilities?
Well, establishing all the seats accessible in a cabin is a huge challenge, not only for the available space, but also for the complexity involved in certification requirements. So now is not the time to talk about that. But incorporating universal design principles, airlines can ensure that the need of all the passengers are considered in the aircraft layout. So something like movable armrest, adjustable headrest, easy to reach controls, accommodating assistive devices. We know that we still a long way to go on this path, but it is our duty to press the industry, the suppliers, the different providers to keep searching for solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And what can be done in terms of making the boarding experience more seamless for passengers with disabilities? Inoa or Corinne, comfortable?
Yeah, sorry, second.
What can be done in terms of making the boarding experience more seamless for passengers with disabilities?
Well, I think one of the most important thing that we need to focus on is in the devices, how we are going to protect and respect their devices during the boarding. So this is the only way to do it is first specializing handling procedures for assistive devices, but also needs to be done by all the crew. We need to protect, we need to respect, and to have something like a real-time backtracking, for instance, system for them to see exactly where are their devices all the time. So for instance, in Iberia, we are working on these kind of things that they can see exactly where are the devices, and in case of, in the case that unfortunately we don't have the devices in the flight, we are automated processing the trigger for fixing the issue. So I think for physical disability is one of the most important things right now. Probably in the future we are moving to the next step, but now we need to protect their devices. This is the key point from my point of view.
Yeah, that's definitely very important. And when passengers are traveling with assistive devices inside the cabin, what are some measures that can be taken to ensure they're able to charge them safely in flight? Andy, could you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm going to just touch on the prior question a little bit on, I travel with a handicapped family member a lot. It is so stressful.
Yeah.
It's stressful. It's quite nice that you typically get first boarding onto the aeroplane, which is nice because you get situated. And I like that airlines almost universally have done this now. It's actually very nice. But it's always a rush. And then the stresses are multifactored. One is that you have to get onto the aeroplane, and two is you have you have a wheelchair, and it's watching it getting put onto the aeroplane and just hoping it comes off in one piece. I mean, that's where the stress always comes from me, is thinking, is this going to be all right at the other end? In terms of charging performance, I think we're all seeing a big change here towards a push away from AC power and towards high-powered DC power onto the aeroplane. It's quite nice for, in one respect, it's nice for the world, mostly driven by Europe, has mandated USB Type-C is going to be the charging device of the future. And we're all working at high-powered USB-C devices. What's good on the medical side, and I have quite a good able of visibility in here, is a lot of those medical devices are also being charged from USB Type-C as well. That doesn't mean they all are, and typically you'll see some AC devices still getting put in. You still see them in business class quite a bit, but you also see high-powered AC getting put into the aeroplane in one or two places if it does get them taken out from the economy zone as well. These are kind of medical device AC areas. What's nice is there's a lot of innovation on the medical side, and it is pushing towards this. The high-powered DC is becoming extremely reliable. The sockets are way better than the AC sockets. I mean, I think we've all seen where you put especially in North America, where we have terrible plugs, right? You put it in and it just droops out, and it's just the feeling of disappointment, and you all want to go back to the British big 3-prong thing that you just can't get out even if you pull really hard. That's kind of one element. The aircraft themselves are more aligned towards charging. I think a lot of this has been driven by cell phone technology. That we came up with a phrase called charging anxiety. No one wants to get on the aeroplane and not be able to charge their phone up. Well, you have that same thing times 10 if you have a medical device. But the medical devices themselves are getting better powered as well. So I think as an industry, the market's kind of driving us towards this. We're able to leverage other technologies coming in, and we're able to leverage the consistency of USB Type-C coming in on the DC side that's probably driving towards that element of stress getting taken out. Reliability is going way up. The USB Type-C is a way better socket than the Type-A ever was. And frankly, it's better than the AC sockets are as well, because I don't know about you guys, but they're not the best sockets in the world. Let's face it. They seem to be broken a lot more than not broken.
Yeah, I'm with Andy on this one. The ubiquity of USB Type-C and the reliability of USB Type-C, it's definitely where the industry is going. And we've seen the same thing for med devices and all different types of devices that are not just your general consumer electronics, that are seemingly adopting USB-C as the way that you charge these things.
Hootie, do you have anything to add? I saw you.
Yeah, actually, it's the perfect example of what we were discussing before about, you know, standardization of gesture, right? USB-C has been able to standardize, you know, power distribution. So it's definitely, you know, the right way to go. Now, I also think that there may, you know, maybe opportunities to, in some cases, let's say, if not get rid of some of those assistive devices, but then replace them by features that would be in the IFE. Here's an example that we have been contemplating, you know, at Thales, which was about providing a, let's say, a hearing impaired software that would be already, you know, within the IFE, right? You know how, you know, users, you know, that, for example, passengers that have some, you know, hearing impairment and that require some of those, you know, devices, out of ear devices. Sometimes they have issues to, for example, charge them, right? Or let's say they have you know, echoes as soon as they put like other headsets, you know, things like this, right? There may be some incompatibilities. So what if we were to actually have a software capability like this, but directly within the IFE? And that's something where, in this case, in the way the IFE can you know, provide an equivalent level of service, but without having to, you know, carry and use the device, you know, during the flight. So that's kind of like things that I think we need to continue to evaluate, okay, to see how we can complement those devices. And by the way, I also wanted to super quickly touch base on, you know, what your previous question about the seamless passenger, let's say, boarding, right? I think Luis highlighted at the beginning of the conversation that you know, passengers with disabilities were the ones that were actually preparing their flight the most. Wouldn't it be great that, for example, before you go in a flight, you could have like, you know, a 3D animation, or you could have like a training of how to use, you know, the UI and what kind of applications you're going to have on board, and what's going to happen as you enter the cabin, right? Again, whether you are, again, blind, or whether you are, you know, you have a hearing impairment or a physical impairment, that you would be able to experience how is the travel going to happen, right? Before you leave it. So that actually by the time you board in, you already have almost like a mental representation of what's going to happen. You know, I believe that the level of stress would dramatically reduce. So those are, I think, you know, some things that I believe airlines should also maybe consider or look into, and how can we also like best support them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And as a collective industry, how can we work on reducing unconscious bias and how we think and speak about accessibility? Jamie, I would love to hear from you.
Well, firstly, you know, as an industry, we need to be more diverse. We need more voices, more like different voices. We need to start employing a more diverse workforce that includes people with disabilities, whilst also doing the groundwork to cater to certain like accommodations. We also need to make sure that people with disabilities are part of these conversations that we're having right now, to make sure that we have like a variety of viewpoints. And lastly, we also need to do like our own research, like within our own companies who we employ, to make changes for people with disabilities so that they aren't doing all the emotional labor. It can be exhausting for them to constantly be educating people on how to help them, like how to make these accommodations. So that's why we need to do our own research without making assumptions.
Right. Absolutely. Corinne, would you be able to speak on this as well?
Yeah, I think I have offer a different perspective on it. Lived experience. I know I'm not the same person that I was 20, 30 years ago. I can't see as well, probably can't hear as well, and maybe in a few years' time I won't be able to move as fast. So I think when we're thinking about accessibility, I think, we need to build products, that are totally inclusive, whether you have zero vision or almost perfect vision. You know what I mean? And I think it's that approach, whether you've got perfect hearing or not so perfect or zero hearing. Because I think one thing that's going to happen to all of us is we're all going to age. And we've all been traveling in this industry. And I know in 40 years' time, I still want to be able to hop on a plane. I still want to enjoy the IFE, and I still want to, enjoy all the amenities that the airline offers and be able to do that, even though I might not have a disability as it is defined today. I will be older. And we know with age, all things start to happen and change. So I think if we take that approach and be inclusive of all and build the products, from 0 to 100, so to speak, I think that's where we're going to have a lot of success, and understanding, all the in-betweens as well, and building for that. And I think we take that approach, we take all the bias out, because we're all human, we're all going to age, and sooner or later, we're all going to need something to help us along our journey in life. And I think, realizing that it affects all of us, I think is probably a good first step forward, in my opinion.
That's a great perspective. Duncan, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I really like what you said then, Corinne. We are all definitely heading in that direction. Some faster than others.
Yeah, I'm fighting it.
You look terrific, Corinne.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. I try.
I think we used to pride ourselves on being mobile first, that we built a mobile first application, and our philosophy was kind of like following that kind of tech mantra. I actually recently came to the conclusion it's probably not the most important thing for us to become more people first in our approach and use more inclusive language internally, and that will shift part of the sort of biases that we have towards what we're trying to build in terms of most advanced functionality that you can fit on a smaller screen. So we're by no means there. It's a conversation, it's a start of a journey. So I think more inclusive language, I think definitely involving people in the product development that are actual stakeholders and part of that kind of feedback mechanism, so you can observe their kind of live experiences, because with all the assumptions you make, academia does not get you there. And I think a dialogue and collaboration, I think today's been great. I'm really actually excited to hear just how much everybody on this call is thinking about it and committing to it. And, we're a small company light on resources, so we're trying to do the right thing and do the best we can. But when you hear like from the industry giants of the Panasonics, the Taluses, and the Safrans, and Safran, thanks for sponsoring today. I think, and all the other partners on the call, I think, just having a conversation and collaboration and hear what people's doing, I think it's shifting the bias even further.
Yeah, 100%. Lewis, would you like to add anything?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in. No, just like what Corinne and Duncan said, I mean, the amount that you can learn from working together, and just by asking the types of questions like, what could we do more? I was working with an airline who was having some conversations with different enablement communities for the first time, not just from the perspective of like IFEC or technology, but from just the travel experience as a whole. And having these conversations is something that's been historically kind of difficult for the industry, because these are different demographics that have oftentimes been largely underserved by the industry. And by having these conversations, which taking that first step is the hardest, right? By having these conversations, you can learn so much. And it's just like Duncan said, you end up having these conversations that are very niche, but they give you a lot of broad perspective about just like design overall. Like you have conversations about a button. The amount of conversations that I've had about like a touchscreen button that have fundamentally altered how like our design department designs UIs, It's super profound. And when you can start really collaborating together and start really listening and asking, more and more questions about how better can we all, design, how better can we develop, and how better can we just help serve passengers. The amount of just lift that it gives to everything else that we're doing, it improves substantially. And we were looking at the size of text, and we were looking at this regulation that said you needed to have a text slider that can make the text bigger for those passengers who would want it to be bigger. And I said, cool, well, how big can I make it? And I slide it all the way to the right. And I said, well, I like the text to be quite big like that. That's nice. I can see it from across the room. And everybody generally says, yeah, I'd like the text to be bigger. And I said, cool, let's get rid of it. And they said, why would you get rid of it? And I said, no, I'm going to get rid of the slider. I'm just going to make all the text really big. No one ever says, oh, I wish the text was smaller. You have these conversations about, well, you can dramatically change the experience and mindset when you really just start collaborating together. And I think that's really critical, is the togetherness of what this is all sort of changing, and really how you can improve the industry as a whole just by listening to each other.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we sort of opened the conversation talking about collaboration across the industry and uniformity. And I feel like we've sort of come full circle on that. So I just want to open the floor again to everybody and ask, in your opinion, what are the next steps that you'd like to see in furthering accessibility in the industry? Any points that you might have not gotten to touch on so far that you'd like to share?
Well,
I'll start just from
okay.
just from the content standpoint. First of all, again, thank you so much for this great session with great panel colleagues. That it's just exciting to see all the developments that are being made. On our side, of course, from the CSP standpoint, it's how do we support? How can we actually provide services? Work on some of the metadata enhancements that we can actually then provide. From a content standpoint, I just received again another email from one of the studios that just themselves acknowledged, we don't have any consistencies. We're not making the same kind of effort across all of the rest of the world. And so on our side, it's really just how can we actually keep that communication going? What can we actually do to get these assets? Because there's the audience is there, so it's being created, it's being done, or back to leveraging the technology and then getting the rights for it. So that we can actually provide that kind of solution on board. So it's really exciting to see, and really just keep on going with that effort. And we'll certainly do so on the content side.
Thanks so much, Eric. Andy, let's hear from you next.
Yeah, I'd really like us to leverage some of the industry bodies that we're in, a bit more. I think we do quite a good job on some things like content and security, but this feels like something we can step up at some of the Apex committees. I know a bunch of us are involved with that, but it's I think we've talked about this before. It's not an element that we particularly want to compete on. It's more about consistency and enabling that magic of flight that we all want to do. And we're all here because we're passionate about aviation. We'd probably all go and do something else if we wanted to make more money, but it's the aviation portion that keeps us here. So
thanks, Andy. Tootie?
Yeah, I think the next step is standardization. At least let's start with some baby steps. So, for example, standardization of some of the gesture controls. Some of the ways of interacting with the IFE. I would say continue to really be even more empathetic. I think it's an English term, right? Or show empathy and inclusiveness. Definitely, bringing in the real end users into the mix, right? Not just going for more feature richness and etc., but making it right. And then I think communication. This is for me in particular the second time I'm involved in the last 3 months in an accessibility panel, which shows that I think again the industry is maturing. So we need to continue to communicate on what we are doing, right? So that again also airlines and OEMs are gonna come with us in this journey. I think some airlines are ready for it. Others, it's a work in progress. And same thing for the OEMs. So, we need to continue this type of communication, showing what are the solutions that are out there, what are the innovations that, some of us are proposing out there, and, continue to make progress in that direction. Again, I think it's going to take time, right? For all of us to get to where we want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tootie. Ainoa, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, many of the next steps to be done are basically what we have discussing during this panel. But just as a summary, I think we need to continue listening the community and receive their feedback. Then we need to work closely all together, all the stakeholders in the whole process. This is key. And this kind of panel is helping us to know each other. Also, we need to invest in technology for sure. And I think for the future, we need to thinking on new products, new developments from the very beginning, thinking with these glasses, the inclusive glasses, instead of changing later. Once you are developing something, you are thinking from the very beginning with all the passengers. And if we taking into account these all things, we are going to improve mobility, communication, comfort, and autonomy, not only for people with disabilities, but for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ainoa. Jamie, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all the points that have been made. We definitely need to continue having like more empathy for people, keep having these conversations. From a CMF design point of view, I believe that like the designers and engineers need to work together with the airlines to implement certain accommodations, features on, for example, aircraft seats, like tactile signposting, signposting in general, to sort of help with that stress of air travel, work with like part numbers to try and come up with solutions that will be like both functional and aesthetically pleasing, because by working together we can create an aircraft interior that's inclusive for all, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jamie. Corinne?
As I've said, I plan to be flying for the next 50, 60 years. So in terms of next steps, I'm going to keep talking about accessibility. I'll be flying all the airlines. I'll be using all your products, and I will keep calling it out. I'll keep talking about it and keep writing about it on my podcast as well, inviting you all to come and join it. Let's keep talking about it. So I think next steps is we need to keep talking, but just know that, I'll be flying for many, many more years, and I'm not going to give up. We need to have inclusive travel for everybody. And I think that needs to be a priority. I think it takes priority over other things. And yeah, I'll be watching and flying and talking about it.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Corinne. Duncan?
Oh, I think everybody's nailed it. You've got to be inclusive by design, and let's create enjoyable experiences.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Lewis?
Yeah, I mean, it's been awesome collabing. I was really cool collabing with Duncan on some of the flight path map. It's going to be really cool to finally see that flying. And I think the next big steps for a lot of us is we've been working on a lot of these really cool, whether they're designs or software features or products, and we need to just really figure out how we get these flying and on board more aircraft so that we can get them in front of more people. We're really, really big on getting feedback. And we value and fully understand that you're never going to get something fully perfect the first time, but getting something out there and getting feedback on it and iterating is the easiest way that you can get really great feedback, and it leads you to make the most improvements in the most meaningful ways, because you get a lot of really good positive feedback. Even negative feedback is good, right? You can change things for the better. So getting these things rolled out and getting those conversations going to get things moving in the right direction, I think, is what has to come next.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to everyone for being a part of this panel today. It's been great to hear all of your viewpoints, perspectives, everything you're working on. And thank you so much again to Safran Passenger Innovations for sponsoring the panel today. It's been really wonderful, and I'm really hoping to see a lot of you in Long Beach in October.